and in asking questions and in being the state of asking questions is where like all these like amazing attributes are, like humility, open-mindedness, creativity, like all the things that we love and cherish in this life we have in those moments, in those states as we explore the unknown. It's like every creative thought that was like not thought before, the moment it's thought becomes like infinitely more possible, infinitely more like it's going to leap into reality. Like so many of our thoughts become reality. I mean, how many people read science fiction that as a kid like sounded cool and now it's like in your hand? Yeah. All right, so looking at a terrible known that you all saw as we were setting up, why do I have cigarette butts on here? What's funny that Chris actually talked about this earlier today, I believe. And the reality is this solution has been an unknown. It's like, what do we do with all this pollution? And specifically like cigarette butts in this case, we didn't know until someone actually started tinkering. And this person wasn't a scientist. This person wasn't someone from academia. It was someone who was curious. And they figured out that oyster mushrooms eat cigarette butts. And that was radical mycology's Peter McCoy. And so he was trying things out. And in doing that, he made a huge discovery. And like that's how like we all originally got to really know Peter was like that huge breakthrough. That was like a lot of the way that he spread initially, and myceliated. And it's in exploring the unknown. It's in that space where you're asking questions like, what if that new things begin to happen? If we just do the old patterns, we don't see new things happen. So something that I was really inspired by recently, we all know that like sunlight with mushrooms boosts their vitamin D. But boosting that, I hadn't thought about until recently, until I heard what someone had recently figured out, that UV lights and the tinctures themselves ups it at an incredibly high level, like to the point where it's like a medical supplement. And that's our very own Cassandra. Right? And I increasingly feel that it's not the academic, it's not the scientists that are the ones that are going to give us these solutions. It's going to be us, because we're the actual sensing organs of the community. And when we come together in events like this, we exchange information and upgrade the community. And so that's what I'm trying to do here today. And so trying to find something out and finding something new is one and the same. And every time we try to find something out, we try something new, we learn something if we're open to it. So colony collapse disorder. There was this guy who liked Winnie the Pooh. And colony collapse disorder is the loss of the bees, honeybees. We all know this now. It's not new. This should not be new. All right. So there's this guy who loved Winnie the Pooh as a child. And he was thinking about Winnie the Pooh and the fact that Winnie the Pooh loves honey. And he's always going up the tree and fighting with the bees. And it's always in that like dead part of the tree, or the broken part, the part that's being eaten by fungi. And he noticed bees were feeding on the exudation, on the actual mycelium, and they were just like feeding on it. And they were able to fight off the colony collapse disorder. They were able to fight off the mites. And the real question, I think, from that is not whether it's like because everyone's like, we're boosting their immune system, we're going to start doing this everywhere. But the real thing that we should be asking, like, is this just a return to what is normal? Like, bees should have access to mycelium. Bees should have access to decomposition by fungi of probably a variety of substrates, I would imagine. And then they would get a variety of different medicinal compounds, right? And each of those compounds would be substrates from their actual environment. So they would be encoding information in a feedback loop from their actual environment as well. So these things that were once normal in ideal situations, but most situations, because peace can go very far, right? This is what I'm talking about. It's like no one's mapped these things. And they're not funding these things in the universities. And those people are just like, I'm going to survive. So I'm going to do whatever this person says. And I'm going to go for the clickbait headliner to get published in this journal. And here we go. Tenure, please. Right? And they're just like the farmers who are just like living paycheck to paycheck, right? And then they destroy their crops so they get their crop insurance so they can make it another season, right? It's a terrible situation that we're in. I mean, we should be able to like take all that. We should be able to use all that and use that momentum to like help the soil fertility. But that's a side tangent. I'm good at those. This was a story about Paul Stamets, and we all know Paul. And Paul really brings a lot of new thinking. And because he brings new thinking, he brings new solutions. And if we start embracing the unknown, we'll start seeing more things emerge from that unknown into the known. And so, like, what else is unknown is really the question we should be asking ourselves. What don't we know? What isn't connected? What isn't mapping yet? So before I get any further, who am I? I'm Matt Powers. I was a musician in New York City a long time ago. Played with folks like this. Actually, this was the last time I was in Austin. And now I live there. I'm really excited to get more into music. My son's into music. Anyway, in the middle of that, I was a touring musician. I met my wife, and shortly after we were married, she got cancer. And so we had our new baby. The baby couldn't be around her because she was radioactive. And it was like really traumatic because 3 months into like the radiation, she's radioactive for 6 months, right? 3 months into it, she got another form of cancer, like all over her legs, and they had to do surgery to remove that. And it like, she asked me to leave that whole life in New York. And I was Rachel Ray's husband's bass player. The guy who I got to replace me has been there for 15 years after I left. Like, I could have just stayed. And I would still be doing like the 30-minute meals, like you go to the new town and play the gig. It was easy. I was the bass player. There was only 4 strings. You can't mess it up. It was the same songs for 7 years. Oh, this song's called Burn. It's not about my wife's cooking. Here we go. E. Yeah, no, that was my life. I even know like the little things, yeah, in my dreams, they come back. So I left that, and it was an easy life. I was playing bass and paying for a 2-story apartment in Brooklyn, and my wife didn't have to work. Like I had it like figured out as like the bass player, but my wife, your person should know you really well, and she knew me, and she said, I prayed about it, and I think we should leave. And I was like, I cannot leave. I am this close to like getting inside the bass players brunch, which is the secret society inside New York City of bass players, and they all share gigs. So I'm sick, I hire you. And so once you're in, you're in. So I was like I was invited, and the next one was coming up, and we moved. It was bitter, but I also prayed about it, and it was the right thing to do, despite me not wanting to do it. And also deep down, I didn't want to keep touring because playing those same songs was eating at me. When I play music now, I don't like usually showcase it with the world. I usually play like a jazz musician, and like my son, I give him like 6 takes, and they're all different. And I'm like, here you go, choose one. Because it's like, anyway, I did that. I did like the exact thing for years. And what happened was we did the Gerson therapy. So we did the juicing. And if you know what that's like, it is endless juices. Like endless juices. You do 8 juices a day, you have to clean all that. And then you make like the special food, and then you like put it through the food strainer, take out the fibers. Whoo! I had like a nervous breakdown. And she was like, I want you to stop because you're out of control. Like it was a bad time in young Matt's life. But Because it was very difficult. We did it for 2 years, but it did stop the cancer from coming back. And so, yeah. Yeah, and so she still has like other things that come up that are lesser forms of cancer, but none of like the thyroid cancer came back. None of the melanoma ever came back after this time period. So the Gerson therapy can work for people. And in that time, our other son arrived. In that time to get health care because she no longer had a thyroid. So she no longer had a thyroid, and we kept dealing with cancer. And I had to do all those crazy juices. So I needed like a real job. And so I became a substitute teacher. And then her and this really awesome guy just convinced me to try teaching. And I did not like school. I had a hard time in school. And the teachers all were hard on me, it felt like. And so like I went into it being like, well, I will be the one there for the kids. And I'll be the disruptor. And I'll tell them the way it really is. And as a sub, that got me banned from several schools. I'll tell you that right now. And what happened was one school was a charter school, you know, the odd duck school. And they were like, you, yes. And they made me their number one sub. And so after me being a number one sub, every time, you know, I was always there. Because if a school chooses you to be their sub, you get all their sub calls first. So they were basically like paying my bills already. And then they asked me to be their student teacher. And as I was doing my student teaching, I figured out I don't even know how this happened, but I figured out that I had an overlap with a master's degree program in best practices in education. And I like wrote this like essay and convincing thing. I don't even know how I pulled this off. But I managed to get like a dual like program in a master's degree. And so I got all the information and then realized everything they were teaching me in the beginner's teaching program was wrong. That's the note of resonance for the lake, I suppose. And so I was kind of a crazy teacher. The other teachers didn't quite like me. Some of them did. I was a teacher of teachers very quickly. I taught teachers how to not use homework and get higher test scores without teaching to the test. Because if you authentically teach someone, you don't go home and do worksheets. If we go out into the woods together and we learn to chop wood together, we're not going to go home and then do worksheets and be like, how'd you do in your worksheet last night? That's some pretty sloppy work. I don't know if that's going to translate to the woods. What? No. Authentic learning sticks with you in a different way, right? And actually, if you condense the way you teach in such a way, you can say things that are so potent that they unfold into the minds of other people. And in doing that, you actually allow them to unlock it. And when you do that, you're not doing it. And that's the real thing. That's what I love. So I got hooked on teaching, and then I got hooked on permaculture because, man, those juices, you cannot do it year round, first of all. It's like, where does the fresh food for that come from? And then, yeah, so I got like really, I saw the realities and the limitations on a lot of things. I was like, there's no carrots year round. There's no like this and that. And I realized that like you could do your food storage, your 2 years of food storage in oxidized dried food. That'll come up later. Or you could have a living food storage, like a food forest, a living soil bank of seeds and microbes all around you. And so that's what I started doing. Started adapting some crazy fun things, and I started throw sowing everything. I really was a Masunubu Fukuoka natural farming fan. This is all throw sow. And among this, there's perennials. So this is a young food forest surrounded by plants that I just threw the seeds like this and trained the seeds. Because after 2 to 3 seasons of just throwing the seeds, and the only ones that survive are the ones that grew on the surface, those seeds are unbelievable. And it's not hard to do this. Not hard at all. It's actually way easier to do this than like bend over and you're like, and here we go. We're going to make a hole now. Wait, my phone's ringing. You know what I mean? And then you get back down again. It's awful. So like I was a public school teacher, so I had to like figure this out. And so I just threw it. And then the soil was nuts. This is what the soil was like. It was straight up 140 degrees. And then you watered it, didn't make very much of a difference. But when you mulched it, it was incredible. It was a world different. It's almost half. Of course, temperature doesn't work exactly like that. So, because I mean, it looks like half in one of them, but not in the other with the, if you're in your temperature, right? Fahrenheit, Celsius, right? So this is that soil though, without water. And I've got green plants in it. It's one of those other things I figured out. So this is Aztec spinach. And so I was like, the genes are there. The Aztecs didn't grow this with water. Grew without water. 140 degree soils. And it was green. No rain. So I put all this information into a textbook after taking Jeff Lawton's PDC. He let me like turn it into a book. And I made as much money as I make after a year of teaching like in public school. And so I was like, this is incredible. I made like a whole year of money in 1 month. I was still living in a garage in my in-laws' parents' house. So this was a lot. And like I instantly thought like everything would work out. And I like did another Kickstarter and instantly failed. It was like, oh, I see. Like I like thought I had figured it out, but no. But this kept growing and growing, this first thing that I did. And it spread out all over the world, spread to all these different translations. And it started the process of me, that feedback loop of like really understanding what like my students, what you all like really need. And in doing that, like I got into this feedback loop of creation. And so that school that I was teaching at had no books. It had laptops. And so the reason like I'm good with like the graphics and stuff, I taught kids how to do that. The reason I'm like a presenter, I taught styles of presenting. So like I'm just doing exactly what I was doing then and just doing it over and over again, and serving what people are needing. And my kids are big now. I've got to add this slide in so you guys see. They're big. They're not babies any longer, though there's a lot of babies online when they're like little. And so this entire time I've been working on the bridge to the regenerative future in my own way, in my own modality, because I'm an educator. But I'm also a citizen scientist, and I really want to invite you all to think about that and think about how you could participate in citizen science and community-based solutions by each of us being sensors on a community and creating a feedback loop. Because I'm here to tell you that when you're in this feedback loop, not only do you feel like connected to your community, which, I mean, we know what that feels like after 2020, you know what I mean, and that whole thing. It's like reconnecting with the community feels really, really good. Feeling connected to community feels grounding. You feel like you know who you are, where you're going, you're part of something that's good. And so I really want you guys to think about all these things as we delve into this and how you can play a part in this. Because the things I'm going to show you, you could have done. Like for real. And you're going to realize why. So, all right. You guys know like regular bright field microscopy, like the Elaine Ingham thing, like high school, like slide, right? The light comes from below, right? Right? From below. And you crank that thing up and put your eye on it. Oh dear, right? Try to see through the root, cranking the light. That's not so good for the eye. Try to use screens, please. Save your eyes. And then think about light like you're a photographer. Yeah, I got him thinking. Think about light like you're a photographer. And think about the fact that they're only coming from below. Think about the fact that they're only going a straight line. Think about the fact that like multiple light sources is like how we make things look dramatic and how we like make definition. And I started playing around with light and different light sources and trying to figure out what things like actually look like in gentle light. So I'm like turning off all the lights in the room. I'm creating a dark room atmosphere like it's 1992. And I mean, it's dramatic. And people are like, how are you doing this? I'm like, I mean, like, if, like, I just gave you all the information. It's like I'm making it dark and I'm playing with the light. And there's like dramatic things that are revealed. Like, this is what roots actually look like. They look like glass. And plants too. And that makes sense because light goes in and they're like little greenhouses and they're capturing the energy from the light, right? And then if bacteria are, transmitting light and like roots, supposedly from some studies, or they're saying can conduct light, this is much more natural. And you can even see the colors of the minerals. And unfortunately, light field is actually like a type of microscope. So when I came up with that light being like, light field, I will call you. That was like, I'll call it the light field technique and I'll like change it or something. But it's not that revolutionary like when you like hear it. But the fact that no one's done it is baffling. And there's a lot of things like this that like all of us like common sense wise would be like, really? Because like we were talking about this and that makes no sense. And you unlock a door with that unknown, be like, why is this that way? And so many of these things are like just waggling in the wind. They're completely disconnected and no one's looking into them. Like epifluorescence. Epifluorescence is incredible. And it's I think one of the best ways to use a microscope because the fungi instantly turns neon green. So you turn it on, you instantly see the fungi. You don't even need a cover slide. You can put the root raw underneath there, nothing. And you're like, ha! The light comes from above, not from below. So you see the surface. So you don't need to alter it. It's such a big deal. We're smashing roots and drowning them. And when we could be like actually looking at things. And so I figured out that and I'm in the process of like fine tuning this. Instead of it being like a lamp on the microscope, we can make a flashlight that's in that wavelength. I mean, you guys have seen everyone like doing the 4As with the 385, 485 in a narrow enough bandwidth with a barrier filter at 510 allows you to see like this. So I'm going to buy filters in bulk, like barrier filter things, and I'm going to get, the thing that we have to do is we have to, if someone's in Austin, Texas with a spectrometer, I think Jeremy's going to help me out with that, right? We're going to figure that out. We're going to figure it out. I just got to map the bell curve. And once I map the bell curve, like the tightness of it, then we can create a filter that will go on top of the flashlight and then it won't flood itself out. Because we've got the pieces and I can verify that they work, except that the bandwidth on the flashlight's too wide and it floods out the fluorescence. So we're like this close. But we all know like what to do. We just have to use a spectrometer, and I'm not willing to go to New Jersey with my microscope right now. I don't want to take my microscope apart. It's like, all right, so you guys know like every 50 guitars from like Fender or like Gibson is special, like downright special, like totally different from all the other guitars. And you play it and you're like, this one. Like that is what I think my microscope is. Because I know people with my microscope and they're like, Matt, how are you getting these pictures? Matt, come on, tell me. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? So I'm afraid to take it apart, but I want to test it first and then like verify it with all these other microscopes. So I figured out a new live dead viability test stain using an old dye, an old stain that they disregarded because they weren't able, it was a time period when they put their eyes on things, right? And so if it blinds you by putting your eye on it, they said no, which made sense for them. But we've got screens and brightness toggle. Come on. This, if it wasn't adjusted, would be blinding. And that's so simple, isn't it? It's you adjusting the brightness sensitivity on the machine going in. It's very simple. But the thing is, the literature, if you just go take the literature as gospel and don't question the functionality of things and tinker and ask why and then play with things, you never figure these things out. And so really, I mean, I've given some reasons, but the big why around citizen science is trust. Because this is the real problem, I think, in like the thread that runs through like all of our problems right now, is that we can't trust experts and authorities, like really. Like traditional authorities, it's very difficult. I don't know about you guys. Maybe you guys are fine. But for me, it's very difficult to trust authorities. And so I mean, like, I can trust transparency. Like, if you go out there vulnerable, showing what you're doing, showing why you want to do it, and like I can see it, I can feel it, like I can feel like this is what your why. This is what makes you who you are and why you're doing it. And I'm like, this is the person I want to support. This is the person I want to buy from. This is the person I trust. This is the person I want to teach me about this idea or research this idea. And it's that transparency that we have to continue to embrace and iterate out that I think will save our systems. And so I want to inoculate that tonight with you guys. I want to put that out there. I want that to myceliate. I want this to be your invitation to citizen science, to exploring the unknown, to being open to asking why and testing and playing with things. So let's dive into this, because I'm going to go through a bunch of different things that are cool, and then we'll circle back to that original thought. So there's a lot of things that like just pique the imagination, and or maybe go beyond the imagination. Because I mean, like the fact that like a muscular mycorrhizal fungi can like just like absorb other nuclei and then source them at will. It's like, now we'll use this. Like, whoa, right? I did not imagine that was possible. But that's normal. That's literally normal. And these fungi, they're doing this all the time, and it's everywhere. And I don't know if you guys know, but like spores can survive in space. This is bright field, this is epifluorescence, and this is them combined. You can really see the definition around the different spores. They're reishi and lion's mane. Right? The functionality of epifluorescence plus bright field is unbelievable. Bacteria can't do that. They don't go to space and come back, which is why a lot of people think that mycogenesis, I mean, if you read Radical Mycology, it's in there, that they believe that this is how the world could begin. Like if an asteroid hit us right now and just like part of the world, the opposite side of the world, never burned and just got pushed into the vacuum of space and just locked out and then hit another planet with water and sunlight, those spores would work. They would function. And the deepest boreholes, I don't know if you guys know this. You guys know this? The deepest boreholes in the world, they find diamondized water, a new form of water, not magma, but really, really hot diamondized water that's filled with life. So our planet, in my mind, like, I mean, yes, there could be magma below that, sure, but there's a layer of like living water beneath everything, and it's filled with life. It's like unbelievable. And so it's like in catastrophe events, it's like the microbes must be like coming out of the volcanoes themselves. Because you guys know all the water that was released. They talked about that recently. A lot of people documented that recently. Water being like created through volcanoes, but it's being released from below. So it's filled with life, though. Like that's really wild. That like opens the imagination to so many different things, and it makes the planet, like the Gaia theory, have legs. By the way, that guy was like microwaving hamsters to revive them after freezing them solid. And that guy's wild. the guy who came up with the theory for the living planet. Anyway, whoa. Sorry, tangent. I just had to honor that. It was so bizarre. So all animal digestion is regulated and performed by fungi and bacteria. This is why, like, we use animal manures. That's why it's so effective to use in composting. This is why they're the feedback loop, like EM, effective microbes. You guys know EM1? They are in our guts. They're in the plants, and they're in the soil, and then they're in the compost. They're the feedback loop. So they're guiding all this. And all plants rely upon the endophytic surface and root fungi and bacteria to help them digest and balance themselves. So their digestion is internal too, but it's externalized as well, just like fungi's digestion is externalized, right? And so they have a serious overlap with us when they're healthy and living healthy soils. And mapping that out is like a huge part of what I want to do next after I do the things I have to do right now. So trichomes, they recently discovered James F. White, Dr. James White, figured out was that trichomes, which are the plant hairs, all plant hairs are called trichomes, just FYI. They're filled with life, nitrogen-fixing life. 78% of the atmosphere is, like roughly, is nitrogen. And so when we think about a nitrogen, fertilizer shortage, we should be thinking about microbes. And when we look at leaf surfaces, the ones that are glowing neon, those are the ones inoculated. It's beautifully dark. This is great. You can see those are the ones inoculated with fungi. This is a leaf with no treatment, no stains. I put it under there and flipped on the epifluorescence. That's the power of epifluorescence and why I want to give that to everyone cheaply. Rather than thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars. And the red is chlorophyll. Ah! So rhizophagy cycle, do you guys know about this? So this is the real function of compost and compost tea. So plant roots are going to eat microbes and destroy them and then expel the ones that survive that process out through their root hairs and actually, well, let's just get into it. So this is what it really looks like. This is a root hair expelling those bacteria that survive the superoxide bombardment. This is another one of that. They're coming out from different pores. And endophytes, they're actually fixing nitrogen inside the plant. And this can be up to like 47%. So like half their nitrogen needs are coming from inside them now. And so they, without forming ethylene from destroying those plants, they actually don't form any root hairs. So what's wild is that in nature, like without microbes being eaten through rhizophagy, there's no root hair growth. And so this is James White. Provide nitric oxide or die. But yeah, that's what they do. They literally feed the plant internally. And it's something that we don't have like a long history of study around because we had sterilized fields, sterilized plants. They literally didn't have this. And then when organic began, they were like, and then someone can do it better over here than they can here. And then it was wonky at first. And then we got to see good examples. And then we finally got to see good examples through the right lens and right light. And then we were like, hey, there's microbes in here. And then we finally identified them. So endophytes are like this missing link, and cerevisiae yeast is in like all the plants. Like all the plants that they tested in the studies I read, it's there. So, and then like yeasts are all over like everything. And that should open up the imagination a ton, just to that alone. And so like all the plant essential nutrients are cycled by microbes. They're the linchpins in all the processes. And then something that is also something that is, well, it should be obvious, right? Because of this light, they glow at this wavelength, and it's a specific wavelength. It's 45 nanometers. And we have that barrier filter on so we can selectively see it. But those barrier filters could be biological too. Nematodes could be seeing at this light because when we shine this light at them, they freak out. And with pinworms, you can actually see markings on them in this light. So it's like, are they using them like in mating? Is this a male? Is this a female? Like, I don't know any documentation of those things yet. So things are very early days, so much unknown, and the opening of all these doors and all these questions like feeds into larger and larger questions, and then unlocks fundamental breakthroughs. So, for instance, you know how they say that like doing fungi, like mycorrhizal fungi on your roots, will increase phosphorus uptake by 10,000 times, right? It's because all fungi releases digestive enzymes that release phosphorus like crazy, and they form these crystals. So there's glowing guide stone crystals along the glowing fungal highway inside the soil, and this is what the bacteria are riding upon as they travel around. And you can see the difference in epifluorescence and bright field here. They both are useful. And it's all that fourth phase water, if you know what I mean. And so it's these crystals and these soils. The soils are also like shards of glass because they're silicates. And that means they're like the hardware in a computer. And that's why they can conduct light, they can conduct information, even though they're minerals, and they can conduct energy. In fact, the correct mineral unlocks like they act as keys. Their different energies act as keys in all sorts of reactions and inside plants and around roots. And they're bringing down energy. This breakthrough, any of us could have done this. And this is what they really look like. It's crazy. All right. So plant roots look like glass, and this is what they look like through the epifluorescence. It's again like green glass, but you can see those crystals. You can see the hyphae and the inoculation. There's a corn seedling. And, you know, I mean, in the 80s when I grew up, like this would have been like a movie among movies. Because the reality is, it's like we live in this glowing world of crystals and fungi and light, and we're still learning. And it's like, I mean, as a child, like I was not this imaginative. Like I was reenacting Peter Pan with the neighbors. Okay? There was not but for real though, it's like the things that nature can show us and inspire us and open our minds to what's possible goes beyond our preconceived notions and assumptions. And that's really like the power of like interacting with people. That's really the power of community source solutions. Do you guys know like PCR versus like nanopore? I've been talking to a few different people about this. You guys know what a delay pedal is? So like you put that on the guitar and it's like right, but you put it on the whole band and it's oh no. There's like every drum like and it's like just mud. And in that you can read anything. That's what PCR does to make the signals readable. And so you get mud if you have too many things. That's why I can't use it on soil. And that's why people isolate things out and then use it. They want that purified sample because otherwise they get noise and distortion. But there's also why PCR is non-diagnostic for complicated things like blood and soil and stuff like that. And they use isolated samples. But nanopore technology strips the DNA and then uses guiding proteins to read the DNA like a barcode. And so each actual DNA sequence reads like an electrical signal. And so this is a way of directly reading it, and it's affordable. This is a huge breakthrough. Citizen, community, science labs, and individuals can afford this. This is thousands of dollars, no doubt, but you can raise thousands of dollars, like in a community science lab setting, if there's a desire for this. But even this, in this situation, like I said, PCR, the fungi resists. Just like I said, they're in space. Fungi's in space and came back, right? We spend like 2 days, breaking down the DNA to like actually sequence it. 2 days. What happens during the sequencing and breaking down? The microbes have to react. They're microbes. They move so fast. So fungi resisting, the fact that it takes extra time for fungi, like there's all these questions that this opens up, like Chris was talking about. Like the fact that certain fungi are easier to break, the fact that over-fragmenting causes like misreads. Like I know someone who was using a purified sample of cordyceps and sequenced it, and we think it was over-fragmented because it read as bacteria. Think about that. The fungi read as bacteria. What does that mean? Well, it means a bunch of different things, potentially. I'm not going to get into that right now. But that was cool. All right, so let's talk about polysaccharides and antioxidants. So mushrooms, we're always eating mushrooms. We're making tinctures. We're talking about how the medicinal compounds in the mycomedicinal book, right? It's all the polysaccharides that are the fighting the cancer. That is something that we need to break apart a bit, because polysaccharides, that's when like the sugars that are coming out of the plant roots are healthy. They're the same thing. The monosaccharides, the simple sugars, they attract the pests. So we need our plants to be healthier to actually produce these things. And then antioxidants. Like we hear about this all the time, right? We do like, we need to take the antioxidant rich food, right? We got to get those dark, I was talking to someone earlier. I was like, I'm addicted to purple food. They're like, antioxidants. And it's true. The reality is though, oxidation is the loss of energy. Do you guys know that? Redox, reduction, oxidation. The loss of energy is oxidation, is the gain of oxygen or the loss of electrons. And so, or it's usually both, but it depends on which branch of science you're in, because they have different competing definitions. But anyway, we'll leave that aside for the moment. But they literally are, plants are bringing down the energy from the sun. They're conducting it into the soil, and they're putting it into the organic matter of the soil to store it as a battery. And it's reducing. So antioxidant-rich foods are reduced foods. Polysaccharides are reduced sugars. Okay? And oxidation is the drying of our soil and the gassing off of nutrients. So the desertification of the world is the oxidation of the world, meaning the loss of energy in the actual like living soil, and the potential of all the future is the soil. That is being lost. So what happens is these polysaccharides, they're the ones that bring in the good microbes. It's the monosaccharides that bring in the bad. So we all know this, right? The old Gerson therapy was like, avoid the white sugar, right? Because that's the monosaccharide that feeds the cancer. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm just repeating back like what they say in the Gerson therapy. So I'm not diagnosing anything here, but hey, look at these studies. Oxidative stress in cancer. Oxidative stress in inflammation. Yeah, oxidation is inflammation. Because how do you oxidize wood? You light it on fire. It becomes inflamed, right? These things are right in front of us. It's crazy, right? How simple common sense it is when we start putting these things together. And you're like, okay, it's obvious. This is a thing. Reduce equals not oxidize. High in antioxidants. I wish I could still eat these. I can eat these. All these foods, though, the purple. Oh, the purple. I love the purple. They're the energy-rich foods. And everything connects to the soil. So, let's talk about this for a second. So, horizontal gene transfer, that's conjugation. Yes, they are doing that. They're moving very close and very fast. They form microphalluses. We'll move the language up. And they spread their genes almost instantaneously. And you see them on there and yes, they're like little rabbits. And the phalluses spread Don't be concerned. But like, it literally, that's what happens. I can't change it. And they're exchanging their DNA so rapidly. Like when I'm breaking down their DNA, how could they not react? What does that mean? How true are the reads we get from genetic reads if they react like this? Changes things. And then consumption. 40% of everything I test, compost and the soil, is unclassified. And what I'm realizing is that's fragments of DNA from the past. They're breaking down. And theoretically, DNA can take up a million years to break down. Depends on what kind of DNA we're talking about, right? Because I know fungi, it resists. And we are using like crazy caustic stuff that they won't even like tell you what it is. And so you're like, I hope this is safe. As you're like breaking down like the DNA. Because they don't tell you. So they're literally consuming the DNA from around them and expressing the DNA that they take up. This is how when Elaine Ingham's like, well, the pathogenic environment creates the pathogens. That's true. And she figured that out before, like there was a way to prove that. I think there's a loop between the second brain because many of the microbes that live inside the compost live inside the gut. It's theories, but that's why I want to do the mind, body, soil after I do the regenerative soil trilogy, because this stuff is real. People are doing things that like only make sense in retrograde. And looking back, they're like, why did you do that? I don't know why I did that. It was like a massive breakthrough, right? And then viruses. Genes are transferred through viruses. And so I have like a huge amount of my samples are unclassified, and then like a huge amount of the samples are E. coli. And E. coli is like this universal chassis that can drop and take up genes constantly. And because of that, they can express, they're endophytes. They're actually commensal. They're already inside the plants. That's why they're in our guts. That's why they're in the manure. That's why everyone's like, E. coli. But that's only 12. Like 9 to 12 are pathogenic. And there's millions. And they change species like quickly. And so, what's up? Yes, signal. I think that means that I need to hurry up. So E. coli is actually the majority of the microbes. That's why it contaminates everything. And all the samples, they're like, oh, E. coli into this. Because it's literally all over. And then the hot composting magic where they're like, literally like, and the thermophiles just showed up. They're just magic. The thermophiles didn't show up. The genes were literally there. And then when they reach temperature, the microbes are literally dumping their genes and taking up the other genes, and suddenly, hey, I'm a thermophile. And then as it cools off, they dump those genes, and then they're a mesophile. That's what it looks like. And that's what I want to like prove. And this is what people are talking about. Everyone's talking about this. It's like horizontal gene transfer throws everything on its head. Because it's fast. It's so fast. It's hard to trace. I mean, as of right now, I don't know how you trace it in real time. So how fast are these things changing? You know, how much false positives are there? And then, you know, like what if? Like all these unknowns, all these like new ideas and new thoughts. I want them to plant seeds. And I'm going to reveal this other thing that I want to be like a pattern seed. And what if we figured out how to make this actually work, how to reliably sequence, how to capture things or map things as they change over time, like sequencing passively. So you're not changing the environment, but you're reading the genes. Like how cool would that be? I think we can do it with light. But getting unadulterated sequencing. Because you guys know that they can like, using a certain form of light, they can like cast the DNA through light into an egg and then fertilize the egg. You've heard about this, right? Dan Kirchner explained this to me and I was like, hey, wait, what? And then I looked it up and it was real and I was like, holy cow, okay. The light can cast DNA and then fertility happens. That is unreal. So what if we created a bionutrient meter for mushrooms? Do you guys know what this is? This tells you the nutrient density of foods. But if we have this for mushrooms and then we have this mapped out and then we have it connected to maybe soil, then we would understand how nutrients are related to those mushrooms. And then we could actually, in a much more natural and much more gentle, much more authentic way, have these things in a truly rewilded sense happen. So what if we started testing things everywhere? What if we started creating new experiments? Because the reality is, when we create new experiments, we create new insights. Because all the testing we do, everything we do, they're formalized experiments. They were once an experiment that they said, this maps out, this, like, they were able to visually verify it or use another test to correlate it. Because otherwise, how would you verify your test results, right? And then they were like, this is the test. And then we formalized it. And that's like the standard mineral test at like the extension center, right? It's a formalized test. And then we fall into these calcified patterns. And then those patterns become what we think is the boundary of reality, when in fact, they're just an experiment that became formalized patterning. So we need to combine and expand our repertoires. And that's what we're doing this weekend by myceliating, by combining, connecting, creating a feedback loop of communication, and being open-minded. We're literally, through each other and through community, becoming more educated and expanding our skill sets and uncovering truth in our lives. So all this data, though, like you're testing the soil, you're foraging, all this data, if it was in a public and open forum, would benefit people. So I am working on a database that's going to be free, that everyone's invited to contribute to and copy the pattern. Because this pattern needs to... Thank you. Because this pattern, you could have this apply to mushrooms. You could have this pattern apply to cannabis. You can have this pattern apply to the vineyards, especially because of all the lead in the wine and all that stuff, right? Like, we need to be testing. We need to have testing be, because the powers that be, the authorities, they're not doing the testing, and then when they find something bad, they rarely show it. They rarely show it unless they want an advantage. They'll like, oh, I can be the hero here. All right, we'll reveal this time. You know, and it's like, what? So this is the thing. I figured out that mineral tests and biology tests for soil had never been like really done in tandem and publicly. You do a test, and you do a test, and I do a test. And then at the end of the season, we judge our results by the amount of tomatoes and how the tomatoes tasted. Not very scientific. And I don't know how my soil compares to your soil and compares to that awesome farmer at the farmer's market. And then to go even one step further, the bricks and the bionutrient, the nutrient density, the bionutrient meter, plant sap analysis, plant tissue analysis, that's never been put publicly in tandem with all that either. So I want to have an open source code database. I want to have an open source database where it's like a library where everyone can, no matter your testing, because this is the reality. Most of those gardeners are just going to do the standard mineralized test and maybe one or two other tests. Standard mineralized tests are going to show you your organic matter percentage. That alone is going to change everything. Because if we can have people correlating their organic matter percentage to plant health, because the farmers in the bioregion are going to do all those extra tests, your test over time will develop a correlation, and you'll be able to have deeper insights the more and more people that participate. So, global and national organic matter levels. This is so incredibly important because this is where the energy is stored. So all the energy through photosynthesis, all the energy through biological activity is stored in here. And so this is my logo. My 11-year-old son's like, Dad, you cannot do this. I'm like, I think it looks great, son. He's like, Dad, that's Moldova. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, pulls up Yes Theory, and it's like, Europe's least liked country. And I'm like, really? It's the Moldova flag? And of course, yes, there he did it to show that Moldova's not as bad as everyone says. The Moldovans, we love you, okay? They had a hard life, right? But my son was like, you can't do this. And so my son created this logo. Yeah, he's 11. Pretty good, right? Yeah, he showed me. See, Dad? And so one of the things that I learned was that like even people who are certified with certified soil labs, they're certified soil scientists and consultants, they're not looking at each other's work either. So in the microbiological world, the microscopy world, they're not like comparing it and not allowing the community to self-regulate. So if you have the community like do 1 out of 5 stars on the quality of your sample, you're like, man, I'm great at images. But then like if they're like your 3s on interpretation, you're like, I need to work on my interpretation, you know? But then someone can take your sample and then reinterpret it and then have a better interpretation than you learning. And this community feedback self-regulation, like people who, like I'm going to be hosting this, but me taking like the back seat, putting open source code, having everything be out in the open, everything be open. People are doing this right now with AI. They're stripping all the publicly and pay like databases and they're feeding it to AI. They've even contacted me because they wanted like access to my database. And I was like, no, I want access to your information. They were like, so, but that like put like a fire under me being like, wow, these people are going to try to like rug pull us. They're going to try to like game us with this information. And that's wrong. Like this is like, that always makes me so mad when they like try to like patent like a microbe that belongs to like just nature. It's just so wrong. And so in order to fight back, we really have to expose what nature really is in a way that's self-evident, in a way that's like the rising sun. They cannot hide. Emperor wears no clothes, and we are fed up with their manipulation of the information. It's like the lead poisoning of all the people in Michigan would have never happened if regular citizen soil and water scientists were able to test and had robust community labs. And we'd be able to pinpoint it to where it's from. They'd be like, oh, it's happened at this point in the river. It's not above it because, Stan was there last week testing and it wasn't there above it. But it was below when Sarah did it, And so it's like we pinpoint these things. We catch these people. We hold them responsible because they're going to get a free pass otherwise. And they're just going to pay their fine and then poison the entire well for all of us. So we have to make it transparent. It has to be open, and it has to be in such a way that actually is powerful. So I'm going to be designing automated readers and eventually AI readers for our bacterial counting. So all the tedious things that are difficult to do, but do have correlative value to a degree if you take in other things into account. Because fungal to bacterial ratios just alone can be misleading. There's actually a lot of studies out about that now. So when we did this, when I came up with this proposal during the last Kickstarter, people came up to me and said, this is how we map space, It's community-based, and you submit it, and they add it to the group. And it's similar to how the Audubon Society maps out where the birds are. But what if we do what the Audubon Society did with Ducks Unlimited and began to map out where our mushrooms are, the types of soil, and the plants around them? Because by working together, hunters and the Audubon Society literally improved the health of the birds and the amount of the birds every single year. And I think it's 23 million acres of wetland that they restored in North America. So Ducks Unlimited is unbelievable. And I know that there's a lot of legislation around those kinds of things. That's why like so much of the money for like the bullets goes straight to conservation. And that's why they can facilitate that. But I didn't know this until like only a few years ago. And this feedback loop of communication is what they're doing. There's sensors. Each person out there's got they've got their binoculars and they're counting ducks. And they're like up in Canada counting these things. So then at the different way stations, the different wetland stations all along the way, along they actually have quotas that they're strict about. The people there are the hunters basically are part of the Autobahn. They're basically part of the system of nature in harmony, and that's the reason the ducks are better. And if we did that we wouldn't have the fear of the over harvesting shaga. We wouldn't have the fear of us going too far and having a dishonorable harvest, right? We will always want to make sure that things get better and better, and then want to see that actually happening. But the only way we do that is by doing tests. The only way we do that is by making it transparent and working together. And so that's really what I want people to think about, because if we work together, if we allow ourselves to imagine what's possible, we start forming groups around the things that we're really interested in. You might be interested in cultivation of fungi. You might be interested in liquid cultivation. You might be interested in pathogenic fungi that are like taking out like crazy ants. Like that's what they're talking about right now in Texas. Whatever it is, you follow that passion and then you develop a group around it. They create a feedback loop for your enthusiasm. And that feedback loop feeds your enthusiasm. And because you're doing the right thing, it builds your integrity. And that strengthens you in a way that nothing else can. So I invite you to like take that and like look within and see what really resonates. Like, why are you here? Like, what makes you feel awesome? And go after it, because we are only here for a time. And then we go. So whatever thing you have that you're carrying while you're here, it's the time to share it. It's the time to let it myceliate. So what if we all became citizen soil scientists? What if we made our own path? What if we followed that heart song within us and unlocked that full potential? What if we figured out that thing that drove our enthusiasm? There's so many people here doing it. David's doing it. Chris Trump's doing it. There are so many people doing this, and they're living their purpose, and you can see it in the light in their eyes. You can see it in the energy that they get. And, really, it just comes down to you figuring out how you can get the training that you need to manifest those things and to act independently and follow what you find that brings you energy, and then tie it into the community. It's as you define your own uniqueness, and then as you participate in community, it's this feedback loop that gives us the grounding that allows us to feel safe and to grow to our greatest self. So in this space of us embracing new patterns that cause transparency and design to help us reach those solutions as a community, to sense those solutions and have each of us be part of that, we take control. We see the world for more as it is. We see ourselves for what we are. We join community. We enhance community. And in doing all these acts, we unlock our greatest selves and change the world. So everyone, enjoy this weekend. Connect with others. Myceliate and let's recharge. I'm Matt Powers. Grow abundantly, learn daily, and live regeneratively.
God, yes! Keep it going for Matt freaking Powers. How incredible is this man? Oh my God, Matt, thank you so much.